The arena roared like a storm contained in steel. 100,000 voices surged through the Colosseum as the gates opened and the champions stepped into the sand. Metal clinked as she walked, armor patched from a dozen species wreckage, a cybernetic arm humming with low power, a mask covering her face except for two glowing amber eyes. They called her K9A, the Ghost Blade. She had never lost. She rarely spoke. When she did, it was in a language no one recognized, but those closest to the ring whispered that it sounded old, older than any dialect on the charts. Her movements were precise, beautiful even, the kind of lethal grace only the deeply trained or genetically bred could possess. Sergeant Diaz leaned forward in his VIP box, squinting through binoculars that could pierce cloaking fields. He'd seen her once before, on a grainy transmission from a slave ring 6 months ago. Now, face to face, or nearly, he could confirm what his gut had screamed then. "That's not a gladiator," he murmured. "That's royalty." The envoy beside him scoffed, swirling a glass of electric blue liqueur. "Royalty doesn't fight in blood pits, Sergeant. Royalty doesn't get carved up and rebuilt with discount cyberware." "She's Zarati," Diaz said flatly. "So are 100,000 others." The envoy gestured lazily. "And their queen's daughter is 10 years dead. Turned to ash at Verdun Spire." Diaz didn't respond. He was too busy watching her now, how she raised a serrated blade and placed it against her shoulder in a slow salute. Not to the crowd, but to something unseen, inward. Then she whispered a phrase before charging into the center of the arena, where a 6-armed Morthak berserker waited, spinning 2 plasma halberds like toys. The duel lasted 15 seconds. Blood sprayed. Limbs fell. The crowd screamed in ecstasy. K9A stood still in the aftermath, unshaken, her mask dotted with crimson. As the arena crew dragged the Morthak's remains off the sand, she returned to her cell with no fanfare. No victory pose. No words. Diaz turned to his wrist console and sent a secure message. "Locate all known Zarati linguistics experts. Priority Alpha." Cross-check the phrase she said before the kill. The reply came back a moment later. One phrase matched. "For the fire of Verdun, I return." The exact war chant used by Princess Kalina before her supposed death. 2 days later, on a dockside station orbiting the junk world of Halvax 9, a cloaked figure made her way through the smog-choked corridors. K9A had been sold to the arena a year prior. Before that, she'd been passed between slavers, fixers, and warlords like a living trophy. She remembered none of it. Only fire. Only pain. Only a voice, human, saying, "You're safe now. Stay down." Now, in her private chamber, she sat cross-legged, blade laid across her knees, humming that same war chant. Every time she said it, something stirred behind her eyes. Images she couldn't place. Faces she didn't know. And a crown. Cracked, half-melted, resting in her hands. She didn't sleep anymore. Not since they'd installed the cortex dampeners. Dreams were a weakness, the pit master had said. Still, when she closed her eyes, she heard a woman screaming her name. Not K9A. Something else. Something softer. Kalina. Queen Tirasai of the Zarati sat in a chamber of obsidian silence, lit only by floating fire orbs. She no longer wept when she passed the empty throne beside hers. 10 years had passed since she'd felt hope. Her people had demanded strength, not sentiment. So she had buried her daughter with ceremony and fire and returned to war. But today, hope arrived in a whisper. A message, routed through 10 human channels, encrypted beyond standard protocols. A single sentence. Your daughter fights in the pits of Halvax 9. She stared at it for long moments, then stood. Prepare the flame guard, she ordered. We retrieve her, or we burn that world to ash. Back on Halvax 9, K9A stood in the prep chamber, wiping blood from her arm. A new opponent had been announced. A mercenary with royal-level combat clearance, trained in anti-psionic warfare. She should have felt fear. Instead, her pulse slowed. Her breathing grew measured. She welcomed it. until a vibration in her chest made her stagger. She clawed at her armor, confused, and pulled from beneath it a crystal shard no larger than a finger bone, dull and dark. It had always been there, though she'd never known why. Now it pulsed with warmth, faint, but real. She gasped. And in her mind, for the first time in years, she heard the word, daughter. She dropped the blade. And the voice said again, Kalina. Sergeant Diaz received the report an hour later. The ghost blade had forfeited a fight for the first time. The pit was in uproar. The bookies were panicking. The slavers were furious. Diaz smiled grimly. She's waking up. Beside him, a transmission buzzed to life. Queen Tirasai's image, sharp and cold, filled the screen. I assume you've seen the footage. I have, he replied. I want her extracted.
Alive.
Untouched. She may not want to go with you. The Queen's eyes narrowed.
She will.
She is mine. Diaz leaned forward, voice hard. She hasn't been yours for 10 years, Majesty. Don't expect to reclaim her like some lost heirloom. There was a long pause. Then the Queen said, I don't expect anything human, but I will bring her home. And she ended the call. Deep beneath the arena, Kalina stared at the crystal glowing in her palm, the dampeners in her head flickering under its influence. For the first time in a decade, she remembered her name, and it terrified her. She whispered, I died at Baradin. A soft knock at the door. Sergeant Diaz entered, unarmed, cautious. You didn't die, he said. You survived. And your mother's coming. Kalina looked up, eyes wild with memory and fear. I don't know who I am anymore. Diaz nodded slowly. That's okay, he said. But we'd better figure it out fast. Because when queens come for their daughters, galaxies burn. And outside, the stars began to shimmer with incoming warships. The ship was silent, save for the low hum of containment fields and the distant thrum of ion engines. Kalina sat motionless, shackled by light-forged restraints that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Across from her stood two of the Queen's flame guard, towering warriors in crimson armor, helms sealed, eyes unreadable. They didn't speak. They didn't move. They simply existed, like statues carved from threat and obedience. She had not gone willingly. Her extraction from Halvax 9 was a blur of gas grenades, plasma nets, and screams. Diaz had tried to shield her. The flame guard had taken him down in seconds. Not killed, yet, but rendered irrelevant. The Queen had made her intentions clear. The princess returns, or the stars bleed. Kalina didn't know what she was. Not anymore. Her memories were shards, bright and jagged, painful to touch. A throne room of obsidian fire. A lullaby in a tongue she now struggled to recall. And always, always the battlefield. Bodies, fire, a human hand pulling her from the wreckage, whispering, You're safe now. She remembered dying. Or, at least, the moment her old self had ceased to be. The flame guard shifted as the ship docked. A hiss of pressurization followed. One guard activated her restraints. The shackles lifted, but the message was clear. You are free only by our Queen's grace. Kalina stood. Her spine straightened instinctively, as though old muscle memory defied her fractured mind. They led her through mirrored halls to a chamber carved from crystal and stone. Torches of violet flame flickered on the walls. At its center stood the Queen. She looked older than Kalina remembered, if her memory could be trusted. Lines of grief etched across her features, but her posture was iron. Her crown rested behind her on a pedestal, untouched. Kalina entered. The flame guard withdrew. Mother and daughter stood in silence. You wear a human name, the Queen said at last. Kalina's jaw tightened. I didn't choose it. It was given. As was your birthright. And you've forsaken it. I don't remember forsaking anything, Kalina snapped. But I do remember humans pulling me out of the fire while your armies fled. The Queen's expression remained still, but her voice carried weight like falling stone. My armies searched for 10 years. I burned a dozen worlds in secret to find you. I was told you were vaporized. Not even your soul, Crystal responded. Kalina looked down at the shard still pulsing at her throat. It does now. The queen's gaze flickered, just once, toward it. Because you are near me. Because you remember. I don't know what I remember, Kalina admitted, quieter now. But I know what I feel.
Pain. Heat.
Voices I can't place. And then a man. A human soldier. He didn't ask what I was. He just saved me. The queen stepped closer, but not enough to touch.
They rebuilt you, she said.
Your neural patterns are warped. Your physiology fused with foreign tech. They turned my daughter into a construct. No, Kalina said firmly. They saved me. What came after was not their doing. I was sold. Traded. Broken. You could have returned, the queen said. You could have found your way home. Kalina's eyes burned. To what? A tomb? An empire that declared me dead and moved on. A silence thickened between them. Then the queen's tone softened, barely. I never moved on. Kalina faltered, just a step, just a breath. Her fists clenched at her sides. Then why does it feel like I'm a ghost here? Like I was useful only when dead, and now even more so alive. The queen didn't answer. Instead, she extended a hand. In her palm, a flickering projection formed. A memory. Kalina's memory. Veridan's spire. Fire raining from the sky. Kalina shouting orders, blade drawn, as the human counterattack surged forward. Then the explosion. Then black. A medic running into the flames, dragging her broken body into cover. Plasma fire overhead. A blurred face whispering, "Stay with me. Don't let go." Kalina's knees buckled. She caught herself on a crystalline ledge. The memory faded. The queen's voice was a whisper. We are not the only ones who remember you. Kalina looked up, breath unsteady. What do you want from me? To come home, the queen said. To remember who you are. I'm not that person anymore. Then become something new. But not alone. Kalina turned away. Her mind roiled. Too much. Too fast. Her past clawed at her like a buried monster finally unchained. Her skin felt tight beneath the cybernetics. Her heart rebelled against old loyalties. She had been forged in war, then tempered in slavery. Was she daughter, weapon, or stranger? She stepped toward the chamber doors. The guards didn't move to stop her. Where are you going? The queen asked. Kalina didn't look back. To decide if I'm yours. Or theirs. Or mine. The doors slid shut behind her with a whisper like finality. Alone in the echoing corridor, she pressed her fingers to the crystal at her neck. It pulsed once, then dimmed. But her eyes did not. They burned. The warship's observation deck overlooked a sea of stars, but Kalina's gaze stayed fixed on the holographic map projected before her. Clustered across the border of Zerati space were dozens of reds, each a human fleet marker. Not hostile, not yet, but poised like coiled blades. Diaz's people. They hadn't fled when she was taken. They'd followed. Not for glory, not for conquest. For her. The queen stood at her side, still silent. She had summoned Kalina here under the guise of diplomacy. In truth, it was a test. They don't know what you are, the queen said softly. They only see what you became. Kalina tilted her head. And you think you do? I saw you born. I named you Kalina of the Flame. I watched you spar before you could speak full sentences. That was another life. No, the queen corrected. That was your beginning. You decide what follows. The map shifted. One blinked brighter than the others, Diaz's ship. A signal. He was reaching out again. He had tried a dozen times already, all blocked by the queen's security firewalls. But Kalina had found a way through. She tapped her neural implant. Static buzzed, then cleared. Kalina, Diaz's voice crackled through. If you're hearing this, you're alive. That's enough for now. But you need to know, we're not leaving you. You're not property. You're not a symbol.
You're you.
And you decide what happens next. She blinked hard. Her breath caught in her throat. For a long time, no one had spoken to her like that. Not the pitmasters, not the flame guard, not even her mother. No orders. No assumptions. Just choice. The queen's eyes narrowed. You would trust a man who dragged you into war? Kalina met her gaze. He saved me, not because I was royal, not because I was useful, because I was someone. You are everyone to your people, the queen snapped. Your return has reignited the empire. The lost flame rises again. I will not let that be cast aside for. I didn't ask to reignite anything, Kalina cut in. You want a daughter. The people want a savior. The humans want a symbol. But no one's asked what I want. Silence hung between them like a drawn blade. Then Kalina turned away from the map. I want peace. I want to choose, not be chosen for. Her mother stepped closer. Then choose now.
Stay. Lead.
We'll rebuild the galaxy. Kalina shook her head slowly. Rebuilding doesn't start with fire. It starts with truth. She walked past the queen, out of the chamber, through the long obsidian corridors pulsing with ancestral power. She didn't need guards now. No one dared stop her. The story had changed. She was no longer a lost heir returned. She was something else, something unpredictable. In the docking bay, a small cruiser waited. Diaz had slipped it through the perimeter during the Queen's internal council meeting. He'd known she might come. And if she did, he had one rule. The door would be open. The ship's ramp lowered with a hiss. Diaz stood there, arms crossed, wearing a grin too tired to be smug. Took you long enough. She paused a few steps away. You're risking Interstellar War. Wouldn't be the first time. I'm not your soldier, Diaz. Didn't ask you to be. She looked back once, toward the obsidian tower, toward the queen she could almost forgive. Then forward. Then let's fly. The ramp closed behind her. The engines roared. And across the stars, the galaxy braced for what Kalina of the Flame would become. Not a weapon, not a princess, not a ghost, but a choice that refused to belong to anyone but herself.